A studio light catches a grin. November 2011. A TV anchor asks a simple question. Are you worried about BYD? Elon Musk leans back and laughs. Have you seen their car? I don't think it's particularly attractive, he says. The technology is not very strong. Freeze that frame. Now, jump cut. A counter spins through the final weeks of 2023. BYD delivers more battery electric cars in the quarter than Tesla, over 500,000 to just under that. Another screen, a ledger with bold totals for 2024. BYD tallies roughly 780 billion yuan in revenue, about $107 billion, edging past Tesla's 97. One more, April 2025 in Europe, BYD narrowly outsells Tesla in pure electric registrations. And that same voice from 2011, older, careful, says on an earnings call, without trade barriers, Chinese carmakers will pretty much demolish most competitors. How did the punchline become the scoreboard? The answer starts with a kitchen table in eastern China and a debt that couldn't be repaid with money. Chapter 1. The Debt. Wuwei County, Anhui Province. Fields, mud, thin harvests. A boy named Wang Chuanfu, 13, loses his father. 2 years later, he loses his mother. His elder brother and sister-in-law sell her dowry jewelry so the boy can buy textbooks. He promises scholarships will pay them back. He keeps the promise. By 1987, he graduates from the Central South University of Technology with a degree in metallurgy. 3 years later, he's finishing a master's at a national research institute, tinkering on the edge of what makes metals behave inside molten salt and battery cells. The work is small, technical, boring. Unless you love the idea that a tiny improvement, repeated at scale, can move a nation. Shenzhen in the early 1990s is a boomtown with a shortage of time. Japan is phasing out certain chemistries. Phones are becoming pocketable. Global brands want cheap, decent batteries by the millions. Wang looks at an industry that runs on million-dollar machines and asks a rude question. What if, instead of buying robots we can't afford, we break the work into dozens of precise steps and design cheap fixtures so 1,000 workers can do what a robot does? It's not glamorous, it is brutally effective. BYD incorporates in 1995. In the first cramped workshop, a dozen people sleep on folding cots between shifts. They test cells until their fingers burn. They keep going. Within a few years, orders from Sanyo, Nokia, Motorola. BYD lists in Hong Kong in 2002. Capital arrives. So does a temptation. Stop here. Live rich off phone batteries. He doesn't. He's got a bigger, crazier idea. He's going to build cars. Chapter 2. The Gamble. January 2003. BYD has just gone public on the promise of batteries. The safe play, what every analyst expects, is to double down on phones and laptops, let the multiple rise, and go home early. Instead, Wang calls his team into a glass-walled conference room in Shenzhen and drops a sentence that sounds like a mistranslation. We're buying a car company. Not a trophy brand, a failing one. Xi'an Qinchuan Automobile, out in Shanxi, with tired tooling and a business model held together by habit. Word gets to Hong Kong in hours. One fund manager, furious, says if BYD insists on the acquisition, he'll dump the stock the next day. The complaint underneath the anger is simple. This wasn't in the prospectus. The implied question is simpler. Do you even know how to drive? At that moment, he doesn't. But Wang is calm in the way of people who grew up counting coins. He doesn't argue about vision. He argues about mechanics. Batteries taught him a ruthless equation. If you can break a complex process into small, repeatable steps, you can teach inexpensive labor to beat expensive machines. if you design good fixtures. In batteries, that let BYD replace million-dollar lines with clever jigs and 1,000 steady hands. He wants to port that logic to cars, so he buys Qinchuan. The first weeks are triage. The floors in Xi'an smell like cutting oil and old ambitions. Engineers inventory everything: presses, welders, dies, what can be saved and what must be scrapped. The plan is not to become Toyota in a year. The plan is to learn while shipping. They codename the first car 316. It is a lesson in humility. Dealers take one look at the prototype and recoil. The proportions are off, the wheelbase too short, the hood too tall, the rear haunches trying too hard. It looks like a sketch of a car, not a car. In a design review, Wang loses patience. He orders the mock-up destroyed. If you're going to be accused of copying, he tells his people, at least copy the right thing, then improve it until it's yours. Back to first principles. What do Chinese buyers want in 2005? Not a Nürburgring lap time. A sedan that starts every morning, sits 4 adults, sips fuel, and looks like the thing the neighbor trusts. They pick a target, Corolla class familiarity, and reverse engineer the feeling. Door shut thunk, seat foam that doesn't collapse by year 3. Heater knobs you can turn with gloves. And they bring the battery playbook to the line. Wherever a robot is overkill, they design a jig. If an alignment task can be done by a trained worker with a positive stop and a torque wrench, they do it that way. They don't worship headcount as a vice. They worship cash flow as oxygen. They write off a painful chunk of R&D on the dead-end 316 and start over with a face that won't get laughed off a showroom floor. The result, in April 2005, is the BYD F3, a compact sedan priced at less than a year's wages for many families, about $10,000 then. No drama, no manifesto. A car that looks familiar, starts on the first twist, and doesn't ask the average family to become beta testers for tomorrow. The market's verdict is quick. In the first full year, the F3 clears over 60,000 sales, respectable numbers for a rookie brand in a crowded field. Within 2 years of launch, the 100,000th F3 rolls off the line. Those aren't victory parade numbers, they're confidence numbers. They tell suppliers BYD can move volume. They tell dealers BYD won't strand them. They tell skeptical investors this isn't a vanity pivot. Wang's language with the team is disarmingly plain. He points at Toyota not as a brand to mimic, but as a system to understand. Stand on their shoulders, he says in meetings, then see farther. When an engineer proposes a clever, expensive solution, he asks the battery questions. Can we do it with a fixture? Can we teach it in a day? What fails if the clever part breaks? The flattery of low price hides a deeper point. Every yuan saved without hurting quality becomes a moat that rivals can't see until it's too late. By the end of this period, BYD hasn't built a supercar or a brand halo. It has built something more dangerous to incumbents. Habits. Habits of cost, of iteration, of choosing the battle you can win today to get the battle you want tomorrow. The F3 gives them dealers, suppliers, and muscle memory. The pivot that once looked like arrogance starts to read like preparation. The man who couldn't drive when he bought a car company now presides over an assembly rhythm measured in heartbeats. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Wang files away a line he'll need soon. If we can make the cell safer and the pack simpler, the whole car gets easier. The F3 was the proof of concept. The battery, done right, will be the weapon. Chapter 3. Validation. Then Lehman collapses. It's 2008. If you're a Western investor, China is a puzzle and electric cars are a punchline. But in Omaha, Nebraska, a few men can smell an operator when they see one. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, a man famous for saying no to almost everything, calls Wang Chuanfu a blend of Thomas Edison and Jack Welch. Berkshire Hathaway's energy subsidiary agrees to spend about $250 million for a near 10% stake in BYD. This isn't a bailout. BYD doesn't need rescuing. This is recognition. During diligence, an executive later recounts a scene that becomes law. To prove the safety of a new electrolyte, Wang tips a beaker to his lips and drinks. Is that wise? No. Is it showmanship? Absolutely. But the point isn't the stunt, it's the message. He is all in on this chemistry. Berkshire's check isn't just cash, it's a passport. It says to boardrooms in Detroit, Tokyo and Stuttgart, this unknown Shenzhen company is serious. The noise doesn't stop, but it turns down. While American automakers are begging Congress for bailouts and lithium-ion is still a laptop curiosity, Munger sees something the market doesn't. A man who can manufacture at costs Detroit can't match and won't quit when the road gets hard. Inside BYD, the pressure doesn't vanish. Car companies are not battery companies with wheels. They are systems that punish arrogance. But confidence grows into something useful. Stubbornness with data, the kind that survives what comes next. Chapter 4. The Crisis. Fast forward to 2019. The good times get tight. Beijing cuts new energy vehicle subsidies, the cushion that made electric cars affordable to millions. Tesla opens a factory in Shanghai, removing the tariff wall that kept it positioned as a faraway, expensive brand. Suddenly, BYD is losing air. Vehicle sales drop double digits. Net profit slides by more than 40%. Wang calls it survival mode. Again. This is where many companies start trimming to please a quarter. He does the opposite. When it hurts to spend is when you buy the future, if you can afford it. The team focuses on a bet that sounds like a step backward to some engineers and a cheat code to others. Lithium iron phosphate, LFP. The chemistry the cool kids said was too weak for long-range EVs. What if safety and cost are the point? What if you don't need to win an internet 0 to 60 argument if you can build 5 safe cars for every 3 flashy ones? The question isn't hypothetical. It's a survival plan. Chapter 5. The Blade. March 2020. No stage fog, no rock star reveal, just a lab rig, a long silver cell on a bench, and a technician with a steel nail. He drives the nail straight through the battery. If you've spent time around lithium cells, this is the nightmare move. Puncture most chemistries and they turn into fireworks, heat spikes, smoke, sometimes a jet of flame that will cook anything unlucky nearby. Here, the thermal camera flares and then settles. Surface temperature barely rises, warm to the touch, nothing more. No flame, no smoke. Boring. Boring is the superpower. They call it the Blade battery, an LFP chemistry packaged as a long structural blade. The trick isn't a magic element, it's geometry and architecture. Make the cell thin and long so it sheds heat quickly. Skip the little modules, the metal boxes that normally group cells, and stack the blades like floor joists directly into the pack so you reclaim the dead space that used to live between cans and modules. BYD's engineers say the pack's usable space jumps by half. You don't win the spec sheet beauty contest for energy density per cell. You win at the pack level, where range is decided and cost is paid. Why this matters in plain language: fewer parts, fewer places to fail, fewer reasons to babysit the battery with heavy cooling. It's safer when something goes wrong and simpler when everything goes right. And because LFP avoids cobalt and nickel, the bill of materials is friendlier to both cost and headlines. Inside BYD, the knife edge of 2019, the subsidy cuts, Tesla's Shanghai plant, profits sliding, suddenly has a handle. Safety becomes a feature you can market to regulators, taxi fleets, parents, and rideshare drivers. Cost becomes a lever you can pull quietly in the factory, turn after turn, until the car that would have been almost affordable is simply affordable. You can feel the manufacturing logic clicking into place. A pack with fewer modules means fewer fasteners and welds, fewer harnesses to route, fewer mistakes to make. Quality engineers stop chasing gremlins across 12 layers of subassemblies and start solving problems at the blade and bus bar. When you build hundreds of thousands of packs, this is the difference between hoping you're profitable and knowing you are. Then comes the rollout. Blade goes into the cars people actually buy. The Dolphin, the Yuan Plus, the Seal, the Han. Not science projects, school-run crossovers, ride-hail workhorses, sedans that have to start at 6 a.m. after a long night on a charger. Sales reps stop selling EV as a lifestyle and start selling, this won't catch fire if you drop a nail through it, and it gets you to work. Fleet buyers who live in spreadsheets circle safety and TCO and sign. The message travels. In a market conditioned to worship headline range and 0 to 60 sprints, BYD reframes the conversation. How many safe, reliable cars can you ship this month without setting your own margins on fire? When your answer is more than last month, you're winning the only race that pays. There's a deeper systems play here, and BYD leans into it. Batteries are not a component you buy, they are the heartbeat of the car. So the company wraps the blade inside a vertically integrated stack. Cells, packs, power electronics, motors, designed and built under one roof. They give that industrial organism a name: FinDreams. Integration means fewer meetings between strangers and more conversations between neighbors. A motor engineer can ask a battery engineer for 5 millimeters to save a casting. A pack engineer can ask a body engineer for a stiffer rail to let the blades carry more load. The result isn't just cheaper, it's cleaner. It looks like one idea instead of 6 vendors. None of this turns LFP into magic. You still give up some energy density versus nickel-heavy chemistries. But if you can claw back so much wasted pack volume that the real-world range works for 90% of trips, and you price the car where the other 90% of families actually live, then the trade-off isn't a trade-off. It's a strategy. That's why the nail test video becomes BYD's favorite B-roll. It's not a stunt, it's a thesis. Safe enough to be boring is not the language of a supercar launch. It is the language of a system that intends to dominate a mass market. And others notice. Suppliers want in. Cities running electrified taxi pilots put blade cars on shortlists. Insurance actuaries, who hate surprises more than anyone alive, see a pack that refuses to turn a fender bender into a viral clip. Regulators, many of whom have had long nights with thermal runaway incidents, like what they're seeing on the lab bench and in the field. Inside BYD, the effect is cultural. Engineers who spent a decade being told they were copying now own a piece of design language outsiders have to learn. Production managers who once tuned around supplier delays now set the calendar. The battery stops being the fragile heart that defines risk and starts being the sturdy spine that carries the car. The punchline about weak technology is starting to sound dated. The company that swapped robots for jigs and shipped a Corolla-class sedan on a shoestring now ships a battery you can stab without starting a fire and builds the business around it. The breakthrough isn't cinematic, it's practical, and practicality, repeated at scale, is what breaks the scoreboard. Chapter 6. The Quiet Validation. It doesn't arrive with a press release. It arrives as a whisper. Spring 2022. European outlets report that certain Model Y variants from Tesla's Berlin plant are shipping with BYD blade packs. No announcement, just forensics. Supplier codes, battery IDs spotted by owners and techs, logistics notes that point to a Chinese cell born again as a German-built car. If you're used to thinking about car wars like sports, this feels confusing. Why would a rival use the other guy's battery? Because cars aren't trophies, they're supply chains. If a pack is safe, cost-effective and available at scale, and your own roadmap has gaps, you buy. It's not surrender, it's pragmatism. From BYD's side, this is the quietest, loud validation you can get. A company that once got laughed at for weak technology now makes a battery safe enough, cheap enough and mature enough that the world's most famous EV brand reportedly puts it into one of its best-selling models for a major market. That doesn't make Tesla small, it makes BYD's Blade the kind of industrial object that bends competitors' plans around it. Think about the message this sends down the stack. To procurement teams across Europe, LFP isn't a compromise, it's a lever. To regulators who worry about thermal runaway videos, there's a pack on the road built to be boring when punctured. To insurers, fewer catastrophic losses. To fleet buyers, a total cost of ownership line that behaves. The symbolism is hard to miss. A decade earlier, the camera caught a grin and a dismissive line about BYD's not very strong technology. Now, in one of the most scrutinized factories in Europe, industry reporting ties BYD's battery to Tesla's product. You don't need a press conference to understand what that means. It's the market's way of delivering a verdict. Safe plus cheap plus available beats clever plus scarce plus late. And because this story isn't about a single option code on a single trim, the ripple is bigger than one model. Once fleets and families learn to trust an LFP pack that refuses to turn a nail into a flamethrower, the brand of LFP starts to matter less than the idea of LFP. BYD didn't just build a battery, it normalized a choice. That normalization sets up the next beat. When the scoreboard flips, quarterly deliveries, annual revenue, even a narrow win in Europe, it won't feel like magic. It will feel like gravity. The rival buying your tech is not the climax. It's the moment the audience realizes which way the floor is tilted, and why the final numbers are about to slide the way they do. Chapter 7. The Scoreboard. By the last quarter of 2023, the flip is visible without a microscope. BYD delivers more battery electric vehicles in 3 months than Tesla does, over 500,000 to just under. A narrow spread, but a first. The yearly totals still favour Tesla on pure BEVs then, but add plug-in hybrids, the NEVs that dominate China's mass market, and BYD is already a powerhouse by volume. And it keeps compounding. In 2024, BYD's revenue edges past Tesla's, $107 billion to 97. Not long after, a tidbit arrives from Europe. In April 2025, BYD registers slightly more BEVs than Tesla in the region, by dozens, not thousands. But that's how tides prove themselves, one wet line at a time on a seawall. Europe isn't just volume, it's validation. The market that invented the modern auto industry and still sets global safety standards just bought more electric cars from a Chinese brand than from the icon of Silicon Valley disruption. Inside China, a different scoreboard matters: brand leadership. For the first time in modern memory, the best-selling car brand in China is not Volkswagen, it's BYD. The badge that began as an afterthought in a battery shop is now the default in the biggest car market on Earth. It's tempting to call this a China advantage story. Tariffs, policy, industrial planning, those matter. But the part you can see up close is simpler. A company picked a safe, cheap chemistry and engineered away its disadvantages. It learned to build quickly, with people before it could afford machines, then spent on machines when it would multiply learning. It made an early, unpopular bet on hybrids as a bridge, not a crutch. It shipped cars that work for school runs and rideshare drivers before it perfected supercar specs. In a business where pride can kill you, they optimized for survival and then for ubiquity. And the man at the center? He still lives modestly. He eats with the brother who covered his tuition with a pawn ticket. At award ceremonies, he looks uncomfortable, like he'd rather be back in a lab arguing about separators.
Chapter 8. The loop closes. We opened with a laugh. "Have you seen their car?" The tone said, "Not a threat, not our league." We close with a ledger. Quarter against quarter, BYD out-delivers. Year against year, BYD out-earns. In Europe, the prestige battleground, the lines cross for a month, and the same voice from 2011 says, flat, matter of fact, that without barriers, Chinese EV makers will pretty much demolish most rivals. That word, demolish, is not about nationalism or teams. It's about cost curves, safety curves, manufacturing tempo and taste, converging enough that the market stops caring where you started and only cares what you ship. For Wang Tuanfu, the payoff isn't a yacht, it's proximity, to the brother and sister-in-law who sold a future to buy him a chance. To a factory floor where a good jig can beat a bad robot. To a design lab where a nail can go through a cell and nothing catches fire. The transformation is complete. The orphan who couldn't afford textbooks built the company that turned safety into scale, and scale into the end of a punchline. The pecking order changed, the tape kept rolling, and the laugh aged into an admission.